Hi, everyone. Is everybody here? My name is Charlie. I'm on the sales team at Hyperproof, and just wanted to take a moment to let y'all know that this presentation is being recorded, and everyone will receive an email with the recording in the next 2 days or so. Also wanted to let you know that we will have time for a Q&A.
Hi everyone. Thank you.
Great.
Thank. Hi. Thank you, Charlie. And welcome to this webinar on CMMC, the cybersecurity maturity model certification. My name is Jing Song Zhao, and I'm the Director of Content Marketing at Hyperproof, and I'm really thrilled to have our featured speaker, Jerry Leishman, with us today. Jerry is one of the foremost experts on CMMC. So I'm really happy that he's here. Wanted to introduce him before we jump into the presentation. So Jerry is currently the Vice President and National Regulatory Compliance Director at Cortec Group. He focuses on assisting the 350,000 small, medium, and large U.S. defense and aerospace organizations in meeting the new Department of Defense CMMC security and compliance requirements, which will begin in fall of this year. Jerry's focus is on providing all defense industrial base with risk-based and cost-effective solutions to help suppliers keep their existing DoD contracts and leverage cybersecurity as a competitive advantage to win more business. Jerry is an active speaker on CMMC and ITAR impacts to in-house counsel, compliance officers, and CIOs, and is partnering with the Pacific Northwest Defense and Aerospace Coalition to accelerate CMMC awareness and adoption. In addition to Jerry's CMMC work, he also has a long history of leading successful security and compliance projects, and is very well versed in a variety of frameworks like ITAR, DFARS, EAR, FedRAMP, ISO 27001, SOC 1, SOC 2. Really happy to have you here, Jerry. Welcome.
Thank you very much. It's great to be here and share the word about the cybersecurity maturity model, and just really focusing on helping the U.S. protect its leadership in military infrastructure and economic prosperity, not only today but for our kids and our futures. As you all know, we are constantly under attack by cyber attacks as we become more and more network connected. So I'm excited to kind of share what's going on there for those that are on the call today.
So let's just jump right in. Jerry, why don't you give us some background on why the CMMC has been rolled out as the new standard for future DoD acquisitions, and how is the CMMC different from what existed before? Right.
So cybersecurity is kind of the core to the whole problem. As everyone sees, there is ongoing cybersecurity attacks from nation adversaries, from criminals, ransomware, and it's become a national security concern for the Department of Defense, the President, and the defense and aerospace industry, as well as commercial. I mean, everyone wants to keep their intellectual property, both their own, protected from theft, as well as their customers and partners. We all know that if you do get a breach and your information is exfiltrated and it becomes public, if you're the CEO, most likely you would end up losing your job. Lots of legal issues come up. So it is definitely a business risk instead of just an IT issue. So the DoD really is losing, I'll say, around $600 billion a year in intellectual property through the entire supply chain. So it's a big deal. It's actually, cybersecurity worldwide is probably the fastest growing threat to every company in the world. And from just a financial standpoint, it's expected by 2021 that there'll be $6 trillion globally of cybersecurity exfiltration and loss, which actually is more profitable than the entire global drug trade of illegal drugs. So if I'm a criminal, is it easier to do cybersecurity, hack and ransomware, or move drugs from Colombia to the U.S. or wherever? Obviously, the risk is a lot lower with cyberspace. So that growth there with 5G, with quantum computing, is just going to continue to accelerate and get worse from a cybersecurity, cyber attack from our adversaries and criminals. So that's the big issue that the DoD recognizes, both from a military perspective as well as our national prosperity. So I hear that, you see it in the news, but how important is that really? Well, let's just take a couple that just have happened in the last 2 months. Lockheed Martin, General Dynamics, Boeing, Tesla, and SpaceX, they're all customers of a company called Visser Precision, which is a small Colorado-based manufacturer, and they were hacked. And their the customers' technical documents were exposed through the hack and made public out on a website, which was sensitive information, which they call controlled unclassified information. But the company was also held to ransomware. So now not only are you seeing nation states, but also criminals combined to, take money from our companies. And this is not just in the U.S., but it's globally, and it's happening today. So it's really important in our defense and aerospace business to really lock that down to prevent that kind of threats to your company's livelihood and brand. Another area that's really a big concern right now is in the university space. Even just a couple weeks ago, there was a foreign exchange student at the University of California, San Francisco, that was working on some Navy research around propulsion. Well, he has happened to be apprehended at the LAX airport on his way back to China. And then subsequently they found out he was part of the Chinese military. So effectively he was in as a spy, stealing information that you and I as taxpayers have been paying for and taking it back to China so they can leverage our IP to build their low-cost comparative solutions. And that's not a good thing for us as the United States. So it's a real problem. It's right now, and it's growing. And if it doesn't get addressed, it'll be potentially the loss of our world leadership as the United States. That's why I'm involved with this, because I have a passion about protecting our leadership in the country, protecting my kids. And it's moved to a cyber war in effect. And it affects everybody, not only defense suppliers, but even commercial suppliers in the future. So you're just some numbers to really help you understand the breadth and depth of where the vulnerabilities are. And this is just the defense space. But if you just take the 300,000 global defense suppliers and think about that's the supply chain, and it's just for the DoD. However, some of the recent federal civilian contracts around IT that are just out there as we speak are also going to be bringing in CMMC requirements into the contract requirements for IT service providers in the commercial and non-DoD space to actually meet the same level of higher level cybersecurity. So that 300,000 is going to go up to 3 million entities are now going to be affected by meeting CMMC requirements in the future, really about better cyber security hygiene. I had mentioned 600 billion was a number, 4,000 per person. And then what's really interesting is the DoD creates a lot of the intellectual property and it gets passed down to all the suppliers. So 80% of what the DoD builds ends up in the supply chain. And that's where it gets accessed by exfiltration and hacking. And then on the university side, there's 1.1 million foreign students that are coming from international countries that are in our colleges that have access in a collaborative environment. As you all know, the universities, they don't have a lot of restrictions because it's meant to collaborate. Those folks have access to some of our sensitive information that these universities are doing R&D on for the DoD, because that's where all the innovation happens. So that's the breadth of the problem that the United States, the DoD, and even all of federal government is looking at. So what's the DoD doing about it? This is where the cybersecurity maturity model has come in. Before we talk about exactly what that is, you got to look, well, haven't they done something in the past? And the answer is yes. They've done basically three things. They've introduced the ITAR legal rules, which protects military information from the U.S. from flowing out to adversaries on a worldwide basis. So there's a whole government process to protect our intellectual property from going to them. There's a notion of import and export controls where certain products can go to only certain countries. So that's managed. However, there's no enforcement and audits and reviews of that. So the only time something is exposed is if it happens, and then a company can be fined, removed from business, and the brand is tarnished. So there's really not a lot of controls to make sure that happens other than the company itself. So the government realized, well, we need to really focus on our supply chain. So they introduced NIST 800-171, which many may know as DFARS, was implemented January 1st, 2018. And this was really an attempt by the DoD to say, hey, every supplier in our supply chain needs to meet a basic minimum of 110 cybersecurity controls, which is really what NIST 800-171 is. However, you just self-attest, and we know that you won't be fully meet all of those controls, but if you just tell us about it, we're okay. However, and then if you have a plan to move forward to reduce your gaps. However, in 2 years, people are busy. There's been no progress in mitigating those gaps at most companies, so the exfiltration continues to happen. So even though there's been rules out there and it's been self-managed by the industry, it hasn't got the results. So that's where the DoD response comes into play. They know that it's not working, so they're changing the game. So what they're going to do, or what they are doing, is obviously they're still going to have the ITAR, which is restrict and control the export of defense military-related technologies information. That's still in place. But they know that because of the exfiltration through internal systems of the 300,000 plus suppliers, that needs to be locked down. So that's the big change there. One is they're going to focus actually on the data that flows through the suppliers' organizations from sales to shipping. So it becomes the data flows through the organization, so it's going to affect people, process, and technology. So that's a big deal. The other thing, they're going to codify the practices and processes, and that's where the CMMC model comes into play. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a second, but you now have a model with acceptance criteria to apply the internal systems of the 300,000 plus suppliers. Then the real big difference is they are going to do a audit, where before it was self-attestation. They're going to ensure that you pass it before they issue awards. So we're moving to an audit-based approach, which is a big deal. It used to be fake it till you make it with NIST 171. But CMMC, now you got to pay to play and prove it before you get the awards. And now people have to pay attention. The big reason for that is if you don't get certified in CMMC, you won't qualify for your DoD contracts, which means that you won't get business, and that puts your company at risk of going out of business. So DoD is turning it upside down. They're saying you got to pay to play. We're going to not trust you. We're going to verify. We're going to trust but verify. And you have to invest to be in the game. Otherwise, you're too risky of a company or supplier that the DoD can trust. So that's the game changer that's going on here. And it's going to be rolled out to federal. It'll probably be rolled out to commercial companies as well. So maybe not today unless you have DoD contracts, but over the next few years, the cybersecurity model is being discussed as a baseline for modern business to protect the intellectual property of customers, partners, and the government. So that's why it's a big deal. It's a game changer. It's introducing a third-party audit into a significant industry, our largest industry in the country. So what does that look like in detail? Basically, they took the NIST 171, and this is what the DoD has done. They took NIST 171 and looked at the best practices of other standards and aggregated it all into one. And that's what they're calling CMMC. The real focus is on the internal systems and the data that flows through that. And so there's 3 types of information that they're looking at. So if you have any of these types of information and you're doing DoD work, it will define what level of CMMC that you'll need to adhere to and get audited against. I'll get into detail of that in a second. But first one is just the federal contract information. This is really non-public. This is stuff that's in contract. So if you're like a landscaper or you're just an IT service provider as part of the contract with the Army or any other government organization, there might be some sensitive information there, but it's just contract-based. It doesn't give away any secrets. But the government does want to protect that because it's non-public. Controlled unclassified, this is the majority of the information that contains technical drawings, things that we don't want our adversaries or criminals to get a hold of because it would impact and hurt the company or the country if it was given to those sorts of folks. So they call that controlled unclassified information. And that's the gist of what we're going to be focused on with CMMC. Everybody that makes something that has technical drawings has controlled unclassified information. And they'll typically be a level 3, which is effectively what the DFARS clause today require. So we'll get into that model in a second. The third area is the ITAR information, which we talked about is really military-oriented. It's highly sensitive. That's the other piece of content that flows through these suppliers. Now, one supplier may have contracts that has all 3 of these. So that's the first step in understanding what type of information flows through my organization. If I don't have any of this, and I don't have DoD contracts, I don't have to worry about CMMC yet. But if I do, then it applies and I have to get prepared and go through a third-party audit. And if I'm a primary and I've got subs, my subs also have to meet that level of compliance. It's like a cookie, right? You buy a cookie, you don't want part of it to be with a piece that's not very good. You want the whole cookie to be good, and that's what the DoD wants. So that's why it's the flow down to all your suppliers have to have the same level as the prime. Rollout begins, as Jay-Z said, here in the fall. They're starting with a crawl, walk, run approach. They're going to start with 10 DoD contracts of different sizes. They have not been announced yet, but those prime customers and their subcontractors will need to go through the certification process prior to the award of those contracts, which will probably happen in the first quarter of 2021. Bottom line is, on the right side, Ellen Lord, she's the Undersecretary of Defense and Acquisition, says, in order to win a contract or successfully rebid on a contract, you will need to pass the CMMC audit. Bottom line, they're switching the game. You can't be partial. You can't just have a plan. You actually have to get audited and demonstrate your security and compliance prior to award. So that's a big deal. So in my pictures, we've got PCI out there, we've got SOX, we've got ISO 9000, we've got HIPAA, and that touches on different parts of businesses. But CMMC focuses on the data from sales to shipping, so it's much more invasive, and it'll probably be a larger impact to organizations than what PCI has been and what HIPAA has been, and even what ISO 9000 is, because it touches people, process, and technology from sales to shipping. And you get audited on it, a third-party audit. So it's a big deal. So just quickly on the maturity model itself, now we're getting down to little details. The CMMC comes in 5 levels. Level 1's the lowest level, 17 practices or controls that you'll need to meet. Basically the FAR rules, if you're familiar with that. Very lightweight, but they still have to go through the audit. These are ones that only have FCI type of information, which is contractual but not CUI. Same with level 2, but they have a little bit more access to the information, and they have a total of 55, or actually 72 controls that they'll need to be audited on. And then level 3, which is the one I talked about, is kind of when you have CUI. There's 130 controls that you have to meet there. So if you look on the right side, you got 17 for level 1, 55, and 58. But based on the level you end up, based on the business that you're in, you have to meet the prior levels ahead of you. So level 3 will require 130 practices and processes. And just on the practices, you can see that it's broken down into the NIST model, 17 domain areas from asset control systems to information integrity to physical security, access control. They're a variety of different domains, 17 of them, and each of those will have capabilities in them that are sets of requirements, which the DoD has called practices instead of controls. And then that's kind of a point-in-time sort of solution. You have to have these in, but they added processes in. So not only do you have to get compliant, but you have to stay compliant. So the goal here is to get you to a certification level, get audited, and make sure that those processes are adhered to so you stay compliant. So it's a resiliency play. So get secure and stay secure, and that's what the DoD wants out of the CMC model for the suppliers that it applies to. So how do I know what I need to worry about? DoD in the contracts and the RFI and RFP process will highlight in the RFI and RFP specifically as a requirement a CMMC level. So you would go there, see if it's a level 1, 2, 3, or 4, or 5, and that's the one you're going to have to be to effectively get the award. Not at the time of the RFI or the RFP, but at the time of award, which gives you a little bit of headway. But some of the mitigations that you may find with gaps in your security maturity, it may take you months or even years, depending on the complexity that you have. So it's something you really have to look at now and start from a strategy and get your leadership aligned to start moving in that direction. And then the other thing is I want to highlight that last bullet point is the DoD is starting with just a baseline, but we know the adversaries are continuing to get more sophisticated. There's a lot of other ways that organizations can be attacked other than the basic 1.0 model. So they'll be adding more practices and processes over time to the model to make it more and more secure and a higher bar to meet. So this is a starting point for the DoD and cybersecurity. In other words, it's not a one and done. It's a one, practice it, and then keep moving up the bar as the DoD adds requirements to the model. And you get to get certified every 3 years. Will be kind of the renewal as we get into that. All right. Let's do that. Okay.
Thanks.
That's a quick overview, but it was kind of broad. I hope it helped.
Okay, so let's dig in a little bit more specifically. Jerry, can you tell us more about what types of companies need to be certified and what does the certification process really involve?
Great question. I touched on a few of those things. The model has levels 1 through 5. Level 1, you have 17 practices. Level 5, you've got 170 practices and processes. So depending on the products that you make, the contracts that you have, and the flow downs from your customer tell you what level of security that they require as part of the contractual. And the legal side, if you have ITAR, there's legal ramifications. So you look at those things to come up, well, really, I'm a level 3 company that I'm going to need to be certified for my current contracts. The other thing that you need to think about is at the point in time, based on what I have, you have to ask yourself, well, if I can be a level 4, a higher level, that gives me a competitive advantage over somebody that maybe it's only a level 2. So I, as a business decision and a strategic decision, may decide to go for a higher level. I know it's going to cost more. There's more controls, but it gives me that strategic value and advantage when it comes to bidding against my peers for new contracts. So that's like the first step that you need to do as an organization. And as I mentioned, any organization that sells or services Department of Defense has to get certified. So once you've determined what level of certification you want, you'll go through a process, and then that process will get you a certification. And I'll get another slide later about what the actual process is and what you need to think about. But really, if you want to be a level 3, you're going to have to get level 3 certification. Then as contracts come in, it'll be in the RFI and RFP section C and L. You can see, yep, they need level 3. We're level 3. Hey, we're good to go there on that requirement. Now, do we want to bid on this project? Second thing is what are the criteria really to be a level 3? You gave me the model. You got some description there, but how do they make it a practical implementation so I know as a supplier what I'm going to get audited on? There's a group called the CMMC Accreditation Board, which the DoD has an MOU with. It's a combination of primarily industry individuals that have come together as volunteers. I'm actually on that group, helping with the standards committee. And what we've been doing in the standards committee is we've taken the model, which is somewhat academic in nature because it was built by Carnegie Mellon and the DoD, but none of them are practitioners about how to implement. We've brought in the practitioners to look at that and come up with what we call an assessment criteria guide that says, okay, this is what they meant, and this is what it means to today as a supplier, and how to interpret that practice in terms of what I'm going to get tested on or what I need to implement. That acceptance criteria has not been published yet. The DoD is trying to determine how to do that, but it will be coming out soon. That then suppliers can look at, okay, now I see the model, now I understand what they're looking for in those controls. Now I can start putting plans in place to go and mitigate any gaps I may have in my organization in preparation for an audit down the road. But the CMMC AB is the group that is responsible for that, not the DoD directly. As part of that audit process, they've introduced a new audit type, which is called a CMMC third-party approved organization. Basically, they're auditors for CMMC. The CMMC AB is going to be the one that's going to train and certify them and put them out on a online marketplace, so you as a supplier can go and request an auditor to come in and do your CMMC audit once you're ready. So that'll be overseen by the CMMC AB. And then once you've got your audit, I mentioned it'll last you for 3 years. Unless you have a breach or there's a concern by the DoD, then you may get another interim audit, but effectively you'll get a 3-year pass until your next audit. So that's a little bit about if you're an organized supplier that wants to participate in the defense supply chain, this is a high-level view of what you'll need to go through and who the players are.
So CMMC, right, it's kind of far-reaching and it touches on the business kind of very deeply. Can you talk about what benefits an organization can expect once it's rolled out the CMMC? We've been talking about costs and obligations of selling to the DoD, and that's all good. It helps meet our national defense goal of protecting our intellectual property, both from the commercial and defense side. But there are definitely benefits for most organizations. Like one of them I mentioned, the ITAR import-export. They've got legal language, but they really don't have a great process or tools to help you as an organization manage your ITAR data. They leave it up to you. So what this means is because ITAR is included in scope of the CMMC model, and the DoD has defined a prescriptive set of process and practices. By implementing that for CMMC and including your ITAR and your other CUI, FCI data, you now have a practice set of processes that the DoD agrees and approves that you're doing your due care. And that's very important because it gives you some due diligence and due care that you're doing the right things as an organization. The key part of that is protecting the information from unauthorized entities and individuals. Again, these are criminals and nation states. So that's a huge benefit. The government's giving you basically a compliance plan that you can implement for free. You don't have to go figure it out. They said, go do this and you're good to go. The second one is many organizations, especially the small and medium-sized organizations, have, I would say, kind of partial security and compliance investments in their organization. Some might have a VPN that's secure, and some might have some documentation about change management, but they're got a lot of gaps. And most of the risks are internally, phishing or sending information that's confidential through commercial solutions. All of that is a risk that we all have. So having the CMMC model applied to your internal system, again, gives you more due care, more due diligence, and helps you secure your information along that way. The third is, and this is really what's really important, is historically people don't have systematic compliance programs or tools to manage it. By having to manage, say, a level 3, 110 controls,
that range from physical security to documentation to cybersecurity. You can't just do that in an Excel spreadsheet anymore or a SharePoint site. You really have to have a tool that allows you to manage and monitor and ensure that the stakeholders are moving forward in the timeframes to fill those gaps with the appropriate evidence or documentation necessary. So a tool like Hyperproof is great at that. You can set up that structure, you can make assignments to some of the practices and process areas, and you can manage and monitor that as a compliance program manager. So that's really important that that's done. The other thing that was the goal of DoD is to give small business a competitive advantage. Right now, when they go and compete against a larger company that has lots more resources, small companies just don't have it. But for those now small companies that get CMMC level 3, and it's a lot easier for a small company versus a big company to get level 3 just because of the complexity of the company and the number of people, they can now be equal to, say, a Raytheon to a small drone manufacturer in competing for a DoD contract. So it gives them an equal footing and even a competitive advantage because they can, they're small business, they get the small business advantages, minority ownership, things like that. So it does give the small businesses an advantage to win against big ones. The last point that I think is the most important is because the DoD is saying, hey, we're not going to give you any work unless you're certified. That gets the attention of leadership. Fines, potentially get thrown in jail. Those things haven't made a difference in terms of raising the cybersecurity bar, but when you take away money, leadership pays attention. So as implementers or compliance officers, you now have something to take to your leadership, say, hey, we need to make these investments that we've been talking about, because if we don't, we're not going to have business and our company is going to go out of business. So it's an opportunity for a call to action to your leadership to put these plans in place, like we need a compliance program, we need compliance tools, we need to really lock down our gaps, we need to invest in documentation so we can meet the criteria, which helps. At the end of the day, it's a benefit to protecting your customers, partners, and your government's information. So those are the key requirements that I see. It's not easy, but it gives you an opportunity to defend yourself. And if you ever get into a breach situation, you have the legal support through due care and due diligence by implementing these sorts of things. And it avoids some of the legal concerns that companies have. So those are a few of the benefits.
So let's talk, that's great. Let's talk more about the work that's ahead for companies, right? And part of that is the first piece is figuring out what level of the CMMC it needs to be on. How could a company figure that out, Jerry?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. On the right side, you can see that I've taken the 5 levels and broken it down into a little bit more granularity, processes and practices. The first level, really the goal there is just get organizations to, think about cybersecurity. And so it's basic cyber hygiene, which we all should be doing at any company just to protect our own information. I mean, if you're not doing it today, you're behind the 8 ball. Most organizations are already doing level 3, where they're doing basic good cyber hygiene, protecting the information they're getting from their customers and partners and storing and building and transmitting. That's really the minimum baseline to do modern business today, but we know many organizations haven't made those investments. So that's the goal for most companies just in the modern workplace, and that's the minimum for helping DoD contracts. So what I created on the left side is really a DoD-centric, just a basic question to figure out what level that you should be at as you go into that. Or if you want to go in that, many don't have DoD contracts, but you're thinking about, hey, the DoD seems to be a pretty good marketplace right now. They got lots of money coming in where it's a national concern. They're going to be investing. It's probably a lot more stable than some of the commercial businesses I've been working with, given COVID. So maybe it's an area you want to go into. So the first question is, do you have existing contracts with a DoD prime or subcontractor that is for the DoD? If the answer is no, then CMMC doesn't apply today for DoD. Now, if you're doing a GSA contract with the federal civilian agencies, swap that into DoD or federal, then the answer may change for you. But today, it's just DoD. The answer would be, if you don't, it doesn't apply. But if you do, then you go down to, okay, looks like I'm in the game. Now I got to figure out what type of information do I have and what level does that put me in. So we talked about FCI, which is the contractual information. If I decide that that's all I have, then I am basically a level 1 or 2. The difference there is if you can influence some CUI, even though you may not have it, you have access to systems that you could influence, and you're a level 2 versus a level 1. And that would help you determine what level you'll be at. Really, the goal of level 2 is somebody that's aspiring to be a level 3 and actually have CUI information in their system. So it's kind of a stepping stone from level 1 to get to level 3, and so that's where level 2 comes into play. However, if you do have CUI, as we defined it, or ITAR, and EAR data, then you're into at least a level 3. And then the real question is, are you working on more highly sensitive projects and contracts that may require in your contracts the risk management framework, which is another set of documentation and certification for organizations to go through if they want a military or a DoD organization to own and operate a particular product or service that they're building. In most cases, not, so you're probably going to be a level 3. So it doesn't take much to be a level 3 in today's world. But if you are in a more advanced DoD supplier, level 4 would mean you're kind of in a low-level confidential environment, and then level 5 if you're actually up into classified and top secret, which is the groups of suppliers get smaller and smaller as you move up the stack. So that's kind of a quick way to apply the model to where you would land as a supplier.
Thank you. And can you tell us about the key steps and action items organizations need to plan and take to get ready for the CMMC?
That's a great question, and most organizations are asking that same question. They know it's coming. DoD is saying this. End of 2020, early 21, these contracts are coming. I want to be in the game, so what do I need to do? So here is just a high-level process, and the process will be consistent across organizations. The complexity will depend on the number of contracts, the size of your company, the number of sites that you have, the number of suppliers that you'll have to work with to get through the process. But at a high level, the process will be, one is you just got to get the organization aligned on what's coming. Like we said earlier, it's not an IT issue because it's not just about securing an endpoint. It's about securing your facilities, about having documentation. So it's really a business risk to future business. And so this is where the first step is get your leadership on the same page. And when Quartech goes in, we meet with the in-house counsel, the compliance officer, the CIO, and the business owner that makes products for the DoD, and really get them aligned on, we're all in this together. We all have a part in getting CMMC certified. Let's all get aligned, and so we all can make the right investments and get down that journey. So that's what leadership preparation is really important. It starts from the top down, and it really does this time because it's a business risk, not an IT issue. And if you don't have that alignment, it makes it more difficult. But if you do, everybody's in the game. You get the support from the top to push down through the different workloads that you're going to need to work with. Second step is leadership says, okay, wow, how much work do we have to do, right? And nobody's going to know until somebody goes and does some discovery and assessments against what the level is that the company wants to be. So if you're a level 3, you're going to need to go and find, well, where's all the FCI and CUI data flow through my organization, and everywhere that data is, that now becomes the boundary of the system, the internal systems that are going to get certified. So you're going to need to do that. Then you're going to say, okay, now we know where all the people, process, and tools are that touch the data. Now let's see how we're doing against the model for level 3, which is 130 controls. So basically gap assessment. Most organizations won't be 100%. I think maybe 1% would be 100%, but a very narrow group would probably hit that. And that's one of the reasons the DoD says we want to do CMMC is we want folks to really understand it, force this conversation, and have them start filling the gaps instead of saying, we'll get to it if it happens. So really doing a good gap assessment so you now know where you're at in terms of the gaps. Then from there, you can make strategic investments about how the next step is, okay, now we got to go remediate these gaps in the time frames that we have before our next contract comes. So the first thing that I want to highlight is many businesses have built internal systems and processes, over the years. And if you try to go and fix all of that, it could be pretty expensive. It could be far-reaching to do that. And maybe just say, no, we just can't do that. We're going to get out of the business. However, what I suggest is you look at the data flow and say, can we consolidate the boundaries of systems and people that touch it into a smaller set of boundary? Therefore, you reduce the footprint in the company and reduce the cost of the audit and mitigation. So business side of mitigation of how you manage the data is the first step that we do. And then you actually, then you look at, okay, what solutions can we bring to bear to actually meet those gaps? So like if you're missing documentation for policies, you can go buy it or build it, right? You're going to have to do something. There are choices out there to buy pre-canned policies that you would bring in, get you 80% of the way there, and then you customize it for your business. That's one thing we recommend, just to reduce the cost, speed the time. The other thing is if you're into collaboration, most folks are either using Office 365 or Exchange on-premise. You'll need to look at that information and say, well, gosh, let's look at maybe a Microsoft stack as a solution. We'll go to Azure Gov or U.S. government platforms, Azure Gov with Office 365, GCC High with a couple of products. And that's a known referenced architecture that we know will handle 80% of the controls. And I can run my business up there, have it in the cloud, and let Microsoft take care of a lot of that, those gaps that we have, maybe our physical security, and we'll just give it to Microsoft and we'll just work out of the cloud. Boom, you transferred that risk up to them. That's low cost opportunity, and it'll allow you to scale as well as trying to invest it all yourself on premise, which most companies don't want to do. They want to shift that and transfer the risk. So we'd look at that. So looking at that holistically, then you can take a risk-based approach and cost optimize to come up with a plan to remediate those gaps. And that's really what small and medium-sized companies need. I look at it as, they want to be in the country club. They want to have somebody manage the process and then pay for golf on a monthly basis, subscription-based model versus building your own golf course, buying your own vehicles. You just, you sign up for that country club and everything's taken care of when you need it. It's there, but you focus on what you do best is building products or services. So we're really looking at CoreTech to build those solutions. And Hyperproof is part of that solution where you build that compliance program management and reporting as part of the gap remediation of their practices and processes. You got to think about it from both ways. So as soon as you get through all your gaps, now it's time to get ready for your audit. You're going to need to package it up, make sure you have all your evidence, and make it available to the auditor once they come in. And this is, again, where Hyperproof comes great. If you use Hyperproof to capture all your processes and policies and evidence and documentation, it's already in one place, and the auditor can come in and just work with you through the tool. And it just gets easier, and it's a lower cost audit for you because it's all in one place, and the auditor can get everything he needs versus going out and interviewing everybody again. And it's just an optimized, cost-effective way to prepare and then actually execute your audits, which is with the C3PAO. There's still a lot of questions about the audit. Right now, the goal is you got to have all of your practices and processes completed to get your certification, but that's almost an impossible task for most companies. So there's going to be some gaps that the auditor finds because that's what they get paid for. So there'll probably be some sort of a period of remediation, 30, 60, 90 days that you can come back and supply additional information to the auditor so they can give you your certification, but then you can go bid on those contracts. And that's a big win. However, it doesn't stop there. Now that you're into the post-audit mode, you got to stay compliant. And that's, again, where Hyperproof can keep you compliant by making sure there's alerts, that evidence is updated every 30 days for some of the process controls around access management. There's rules that every 30 days you got to validate that the people that access this information are still in your system. So you got to have process to inform you and capture that evidence. And that's really the post-audit thing. And then you would just continue to do that for, effectively 3 years and then go through the audit process again. High-level journey, small companies that have one facility, make one product, have one contract, 15 people might be able to get through that whole process, in 2 months. You take a medium-sized company that's got multiple facilities around the country, they've got 10 different contracts, multiple customers, multiple suppliers, that might take 6 months. And then you got the large, multinational where their business is intermixed between commercial and defense, and they have no data governance, data labeling, and they can't separate out their commercial from their defense business, then they've got a lot of work to do, and it might take years for them to meet some of these requirements. So that's why the journey may vary from company to company. All right.
That makes a lot of sense. I'm going to combine this question with the next one, which is there's this real question about, okay, so if I'm not required to, because I don't have contracts this year, do I have to do anything now? How long does it take? How soon should my organization get started? And that really ties back into, well, what kind of existing state do you have? And so I want to ask you those questions, and then also what kind of roadblocks or challenges have you already seen from organizations that are on this journey of people you've talked to?
No, absolutely. And so CORTAC works with so the largest steel manufacturer in North America. They support the DoD as well as many Canadian government organizations, all the way down to local Pacific Northwest suppliers that make parts for drones or make resellers of components for aerospace. So we've seen a variety of different sorts of organizations. But the bottom line is the company has to realize that they need to do something now. You can't be a wait and see, or it won't affect us, or we're too small. If you just think back to the things we just said, every supplier that has a contract with DoD will get certified. So there's no exceptions to that. Okay, we can't hide from it. They're gonna find us. So, well, I don't have the time today, or it's not a good priority. Well, we know that depending on the complexity of your company, it could take 2 months or it could take 2 years, right? So you don't know, but what's more important is, when's your contract coming due, right? You could see one next month if you're one of the first set of contracts, and now suddenly the clock's ticking, and you'll have basically 4 or 5 months to get through the process. But you want to be there. And the other thing is if one of your customers come to you and they're looking for suppliers, and they go, "Are you CMMC level 3 certified? Or do you have CMMC certification?" And you go, "Yes." Well, you're on the team. If you go, "No, we're working on it," well, they're going to exclude you because you've now become too risky, and they'll go find another supplier with a similar product, and they'll even pay more for it because of the lower risk that they bring in being CMMC certified already. So with that as the landscape, get started today and be ready, right? I think that's a competitive advantage for early adopters here. Even though all the answers aren't out there, you can get 80, 90% of the way forward and be ready to fine tune it as more details come out. The start should be just looking at your data. It's all data focused. Find your data and find your boundaries of where that information flows. Look at reducing that footprint in your organization down to the minimum that you can for that particular business. Then you got to get your leadership aligned and educated and understanding what's at stake and the approach that you're taking to get the alignment and investments that you need to get this done in a reasonable time frame and not have to fight for budgets, because everybody's fighting for budgets. So it gives you that extra up to get this done. Focus on enterprise systems. And the reason I say that is if you got a bunch of one-offs for this particular contract, you may have another contract that affects a different part of your business that has a different tool, and then you're going to have to retrofit that. So what I recommend is, instead of that incremental, is find an enterprise product that can scale across all future contracts, that meets it across all contracts in the future. So you think at the enterprise level, because the DoD thinks of you as a company, not as just at the contract level. They think of you as a company. So always think enterprise first, your policies, your processes, your tools, so you're able to scale and take on more contracts and not worry about incremental risks. And then the last one, which comes back to what I just said, apply a risk-based, cost-optimized approach. Prioritize the big stuff. Look at cost-optimized approaches. And really what I mean there is off the shelf, no customization. You want to focus on what you need to do. Focus on what you need to do and let somebody else manage all of that cybersecurity operations, some of the IT stuff if you need to outsource it so you can focus on your business. It's too expensive to build it yourself. So look for opportunities for cloud first, cost optimized approach. And that's where we see most suppliers, the only option that they have today. And I know we were going to ask roadblocks. So let me just jump into roadblocks. These are the common things that we're seeing. Some of these shouldn't be a surprise. Basically getting leadership, alignment, and understanding of non-compliance. What happens if we don't do it? Now they won't catch us. We just talked about that. Really, when you say they take our contracts away, that's the only thing that gets their attention. And that's what the DoD has recognized, that we're going to have to do a cultural change to the defense and aerospace industry and force them to change, because they haven't done it on their own, force them to change through taking away money. So that's the fundamental deal, and we're going to do a third-party audit to validate that. So that's the big challenge, is just getting the alignment. And once you get that alignment and they understand it, then you grease the slids for the entire program. Most don't have a good, solid end-to-end compliance program in place. It's just been bits and pieces of stuff over time. They don't have a compliance tool like a hyperproof that can really help them manage and have visibility into where their gaps are and manage the process and the resiliency pieces. So you really need a good compliance program and tool to manage that, especially now at a level 3 where you got a minimum of 130 controls today, and it's going to go up. A lot of organizations, they don't understand the language, the models. They can't interpret the gaps because it's beyond them. They don't have the skills or the knowledge to figure out what to do. In that cases, you're going to really need to bring in expert help or outsource that through tools and processes and documentation. Because you need to understand that that's your business, is protecting the data, and if you don't know it, got to go figure it out. The other one I kind of mentioned is you really need to think of it as an enterprise, security-centric architecture at the enterprise, and the compliance tool to manage that. Because that'll get you to where you need and allow you to grow and have a competitive advantage going forward. And the last bullet point, most organizations I work, especially small and mediums, they just don't have in-house experience to know how to do all the cybersecurity controls or how to do physical security. They might have one or two IT people that are trying to be their compliance officer, their CIO, and they're just overwhelmed already with just keeping the desktops running and protecting the file servers. But they need the help to get this done. So that's where folks like Cortec and products like Hyperproof come alongside and really automate and accelerate the program and make sure you get it done right the first time. So that's kind of the things that we're seeing consistently.
So you've already touched on this, is if an organization needs help, right, in terms of expertise, in terms of doing the work, but budgets are tight, what options exist? What can we consider?
There's a lot of these things I've already kind of mentioned, but I'll just summarize it here. Is like, get an expert to help you through the process so you don't go down the wrong path, burn time and money. Even though an expert costs money, in the long run, they'll get you there faster, cheaper, and with the right solutions that give you that competitive advantage and prepare you to scale and actually win more business. I mean, that's really the majority of what all the small and medium-sized businesses need. And they'll try it on their own, but then they'll come back just because it's a big problem to solve. And that's why it's so important to the DoD to get this figured out, and it hasn't been done already. Second one is just really figure out what your current state maturity is. Either bring somebody in to do that assessment for you, or task somebody on your team that can really understand and interpret the rules to what's in the organization to determine gaps. And then look at what kind of solutions that would be there. Some that might be just good enough, like a standard policy, or something that might be better or best. Maybe you need to go to a higher end SKU for Office 365 because you get additional capabilities that help your overall business, not just meet the CMMC. So it's a strategic investment in cybersecurity technology. So those sort of decisions affect the entire firm, and that's where you need somebody that's robust and savvy and understands how to use this as a competitive advantage and to win more business, protecting intellectual property of everybody. Cloud services, everybody is either there or adopting. Big benefit there is instead of building it yourself and investing all that money and capital, you can just go to an Amazon or a Microsoft and just transfer all that risk and cost and just pay for usage, move it to an OpEx. So that is a huge value add for companies that have to fill gaps. The other part is once you, because of the processes that are included in CMMC, you've got to continue to manage and monitor your security operations. And that's a lot of heavy lifting. That's looking at your all the logs coming out of your systems, monitoring them, looking for attacks, and putting together incident response plans. That's a whole team in itself. And you could either hire those up internally, which is great, or you can go with like a managed service provider that does that as a living and give them a monthly service fee, and they take care of all that for you so you don't have to. So again, it's a trade-off, buy versus build. At the end of the day, cyber is about data, and there's a lot of data coming at us in the world. We really got to look for ways to automate the ability to manage and protect that data and ensure that we're compliant. So tools, third-party products that have AI built into it, just as much automation as you can do will reduce your costs and then reduce your risks over the long term. The Hyperproof, again, I'll highlight that as a great tool to automate your compliance program management and reporting and ensuring that you're staying resilient. So that, I think that was the last question.
Yeah.
KZ, how would you like to go? Do you want me to just go to a couple of my slides and our slides and then get to Q&A?
Yeah, let's just, why don't you share a little bit about Cortex Group, and then we can just jump into live Q&A since we're kind of running out of time.
Yeah, for sure. So Cortex based in Issaquah, Washington, but we're a national practice. Our security solutions focus on regulatory compliance, which we've really been focused at today, assessments, solutions, working with the best of breed partners to come up with cost-effective and compliant solutions and operations. But we also do cybersecurity due care examinations. So if you're an organization that wants to just kind of do a quick baseline to say, hey, are we at risk of anything, we would work with your attorneys to go in and kind of give you some due care baseline. Or if you've been breached, we can come in and be that Perry Mason and forensics to support that, hey, we couldn't have done this. It was outside of our control, just to help you protect yourself from a liability in a lawsuit. So we do some of that legal cybersecurity due care. So that's just a quick piece of who we are. We have CMMC solutions specifically. If you're interested in this, we do quick start to help get your leadership understanding and align, which is step number one. Then we do the readiness assessment and solution recommendations, and then we'll help you implement those solutions to fill your gaps and prepare you and to get you through the audit, and then ongoing resiliency. So those are just the basic type of offers, and you can just reach out to me afterwards if you're interested in any of those or learning more. And then JZ, this is.
Yeah, so I'll just be really quick. As Jerry mentioned, Hyperproof is a compliance operations software platform. So we can help you with aligning your controls to various cybersecurity frameworks, including the CMMC. We have templates to guide you through the process, and you can use it to automate collection of evidence and manage your controls and look at control health on an ongoing basis and do it efficiently. So that's Hyperproof. Feel free to reach out to us if you would like a personalized demo. And let's get to live Q&A. Charlie, do we have any questions from people on the line?
We do not. Please ask questions.
Yeah, well, people ask a question. I'll just kind of come up with this one slide I threw out there. It's kind of the key takeaways, kind of a water cooler talk. Information protection is a business challenge and requirement, not just IT issue. We kind of touched on that. Second, it requires significant organizational leadership, collaboration, alignment to get to move forward because of the investments and what's at stake for non-compliance. I mentioned historically companies have been able to fake it till they make it or get caught with DFARS and ITAR. Not the case anymore. You need to pay to play and get audited, so you can't get audited if you haven't invested. Efficiency and cost optimization require a systematic enterprise approach, so you really have to step all the way back to the business processes and an enterprise view about how you manage data. Data protection shortcuts that we've done in the past building enclaves on premise, but still having spillage to, non-secure environments. That's just not going to cut anymore because the DoD is going to be looking for that in their audit. You really need expert help to guide you through the rules as well as the solutions and be a trusted advisor through the whole journey. And that journey doesn't end, but you really need somebody that you can trust. Similar to how you trust a lawyer, you want to trust a cybersecurity or an information protection expert like maybe Cortec, and we would like to be invited to like the Christmas party like you do your lawyer, because we are part of your strategic leadership team thinking about how to make you more strategic and win more business. CMMC is becoming table stakes not only in the DoD but across all federal and probably state, local, and even commercial. Everybody's putting that in their contracts. And the last one is get started now. Non-compliance penalties are high and the tide is rising. So that was kind of the highlights.
We got a question from Steve. Steve wants to know, do you have to purchase FedRAMP services like Microsoft 365, GovCloud, et cetera?
If the CMMC requirements map into a FedRAMP moderate, which gets you at GCC 365, GCC High, and Azure Gov. Those are the platforms that Microsoft will take and support flow downs through contracts and give you a business agreement, because they have to do incident response sort of work as part of your CMMC, and those are the only environments that they provide those services. Commercial doesn't do that, so commercial would not be able to provide that service, so you would have to do it yourself. And Microsoft doesn't make any guarantees on that. So the answer is yes. Moderate FedRAMP moderate is kind of a baseline both on AWS for infrastructure as well as for Azure and GCC High. And other products like CAD tools or other tools you'll need somebody that can have a moderate that protects the information at the level of security and compliance that are expected for those contracts and data.
Looks like we haven't gotten. Have we gotten any other questions?
No, not at this time. Well,
thank you, Jerry, so much. Thank you so much for sharing all your insights on CMMC. We really appreciate it. I hope everyone on the line found this useful, and we will send you the recording in 1 to 2 business days. And feel free to reach out to us via LinkedIn or email if you have further questions. We appreciate your time. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, everyone.
Bye.